Okay, hey everyone, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. So I have a really fun little Citizen double feature for you guys, revisiting these two pieces that, you know, it's kind of an organic setup for me because I just recently found out that my boss at my day job was actually quite a big Citizen fan. So I thought, why not revisit two of my favorite Citizen references as of late that I do think cover kind of extreme ends of the Citizen spectrum. So while these might not be the all-out finest or favorites inside of my range of my personal collection, I will say that these two definitely are two outstanding pillars in terms of if you are going to be kind of eccentric into one direction or the other in terms of Citizen. But a little bit about the brand. They were founded in 1918 by both Japanese and Swiss investors, which a lot of people don't either know or recognize. Eventually settling on the name brand of Citizen Watch Company in 1930, with Citizen Group owning Miyota, Belova, Arnold & Son, Frederic Constant, Alpina, and Campanola, to include a few more other pieces as well. Citizen brand is proudly still offering some fully in-house made in Japan options like the models shown here. But they're really best known for their more affordable quartz offerings. They actually did help Seiko disrupt the Swiss watch industry during the quote-unquote quartz crisis of the 1970s. And we have, of course, a dive watch as well as an everyday watch here. And both of them are quite outstanding. On the left-hand side, you do have that JDM Attesa CT line, the CB3044-55E, and then on the right you have the Citizen Promaster NB6004-83E, and that's their full spec mechanical diver. These go for the diver goes for $13.25 list now in 2025, but you can actually get it on sale directly from Citizen for $7.95. But do be warned, they are soon to be sold out. Another good reason why I decided to feature this. So I'll leave a link down in the description if you want to save money. I don't get any types of, commission off of that from Citizen. But the other watch, the JDM model there on the left-hand side, those go for about $484-ish from Sakura Watches. And I'll leave also a link to that. And I even got a code. Hopefully it's still, active and these units are still available. But you can actually use this 3% discount code for any Casio, Seiko, or Citizen watch. It's ABRO, so ABRO 3P25. So I'll leave a link down in the description for that. But with that long intro out of the way, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, so bit of polar opposites, but with similar qualities, right? So these are both going to be in that super titanium with the Duratect coating, which Citizen does very, very well, especially in these models. Unfortunately, there are some models I've been less impressed with, but I'm going to focus on these ones that really stand out for me. Also, in terms of the size, they're quite different. Also, in terms of the movements, you're getting a quartz movement here that is tied to radio signal updates, whereas here you're going to get a fully automatic mechanical movement. Of course, that's going to have a bit more of a soul to it. Also, again, the size, the thickness, my goodness, they're quite different. One, of course, ultimate robustness in terms of just the chunky nature, although some of you might not be impressed with the fact that this is a 36 millimeter diver, with a 15.4 millimeter thickness, and it has 200 meters of water resistance. I will say that no one watching this video has probably ever went diving that deep, because that would be world record category. Most divers recreationally are going to be, getting submerged up to about 40 meters. Now here though, on the other side, is definitely something that's a bit more svelte, more everyday, capable, and you might even argue more robust in a lot of situations besides maybe underwater. But this thing is gorgeous, and I really, really like it. I don't want to confuse anybody to think this is some, royal oak beater. It's not that. It's you know, there in terms of the finishing, it's not quite luxury or approaching that, but it is quite premium. So I will absolutely give the nod from that perspective. And they do a great job of this dial, which, you know, it's using their solar technology to where it doesn't look like a solar dial. I like that it just has a bit of a kind of almost adventurine like quality to it, where it just has a couple little speckles and sparks there, nothing that looks too obvious. And then of course, look at the indices there, very 3D, micro texturing, beveling, very, very impressive. And then on this side, yes, also quite impressive, nice meaty, chunky experience, diver, some bezel there, unidirectional rotating, 60 click, very robust. You can hear nice audible feedback there. And yeah, this thing is very unique. And that's what I like about both of these pieces. Although they do fall into broader categories, right? Dive watch, kind of Genta-esque, integrated steel sports watch, although this is super titanium, you know, it does capture that aesthetic. I think there's something that's quite special about both of these because they are quite different. Like if you were to lay this next to a Tissot PRX, it's going to look quite different. Some might even say better. If you're to lay this against something like a Willard or a Turtle from Seiko, you would also see that this is really just quite a different experience altogether. And these two watches actually give great examples of really well thought out integration. And they're not the only ones who've ever done bracelets and clasps like this, but I appreciate that they do. So you push the button there, boom, look at that. You can ratchet it in so you don't have to push on the way in, but on the way out, if you want to release it to give yourself a little bit more breathing room, there you have it. So very nice micro adjust there on that tool list, as well as over here. Check this out. So very nice and clean. And then you do have a ratcheting dive suit extension. Now, I don't consider this micro adjustment because you would not want to have, you wouldn't want to extend the actual length of your clasp. That is unwearable and unbearable if you did have to try to dial that in. I mean, I think it's already quite long. So even if you wanted to release it, you know, 1 or 2 clicks, which you could absolutely do if the weather, is making your wrist swell up. But I will say that if you did this and you had a smaller wrist, again, like now you're starting to think almost of lug to lug type of limitations in terms of what's going to fit comfortably on your wrist. So whenever there's these ratcheting dive suit extensions, I see them for just that as a primary. And then yes, secondary, you could use it for giving yourself a little bit of relief, but you wouldn't want to have to fit your watch like that. Like if this watch didn't fit well and you essentially had to have it clicked out, a click or two to wear it comfortably, that's not a great solution. But again, for those of you that can get it dialed in, it absolutely works and is quite robust, quite nice. And again, that super titanium is very, very good. Now, even in terms of accuracy, both of these are, different ends of the spectrum. Of course, here, as long as it's receiving signal, you're pretty much going to have perfect accuracy. I will say I haven't been able to receive signal with it. So I wish this was GPS versus radio controlled, but, it is what it is. But I have been just setting it manually, and it's actually quite intuitive. I've had some Citizen watches that are radio controlled that are quite difficult to manually set. This one is a little bit on the easier side, so I'm able to get it going for you guys here, and it worked out. But this is going to be plus or minus 15 seconds per month when it's not receiving updates. So after a month, it might be drifting a little bit, and then I can just cycle through and reset the seconds hand, and I'm good to go. Now, this movement here, quite unique. It's going to be that Citizen Miyota 9051. And a lot of people know about the 9000 series, but the 9051 is something that you'll find in Citizen watches. It has a 42-hour power reserve, beats at 4 hertz, so that's going to have that 28,800 vibration per hour beat rate, and it's accurate to -10 to +20 seconds per day. Now, not super impressive in terms of the accuracy there, but again, that's ultimate range there, right? So that's the highest highs and the lowest lows in terms of that. And you're going to find yourself somewhere in between. And I'll say I have found myself somewhere in between. And I find this watch to be just as reliable as I need it to be. And there's really no reason in promoting it because it's not promised. It's not like it's a chronometer and it has to hit a certain spec. It just, as long as it's within -10 to +20 seconds per day, which is a 30-second window, then you can't really, expect to get any type of warranty work done. Of course, you could always have it regulated manually, but I will say, Citizen is actually quite big on trying to ensure that you only take it to a service center, a Citizen service center, as you guys can see there on that case back. So something to consider that is, again, a bit different versus what else is out there. But I think these two watches wear really well. Again, very different. And somebody was saying, how can I say that a 46mm wears well? Well, for what it's supposed to be, remember the theme. So the theme here is thin, svelte, lovely. Here it's big, bold, and beastly. You don't want a big, bold, and beastly watch to wear petite. It just defeats the purpose. This would look terrible, really small. And someone, oh no, I would love that. No, that's not like, just let this watch be what it is. I feel like there's so many people out there that are urging every watch to be that generic dive watch. Everybody wants a Rolex Submariner and they want to turn every Seiko and Citizen and every micro brand. They just urge it to pick up more and more Rolex-like attributes. If you want a Rolex, save up your money, get on a list and get a Rolex. Enjoy this Citizen watch for what it is, which is a very unique and interesting dive watch from Citizen brand that has Citizen's very own design language incorporated. So I like that. Again, same thing here. Hey, I'd love it if it had all these other features. Yeah, of course, it could always be better, but I want it to still be itself because that's kind of why it exists. It doesn't exist. Citizen is not an homage brand. They didn't make this watch to tap in to, desire for another existing watch. They wanted to create something special here, and I think they absolutely did. And I think that carries over for both of these models. I mean, Jeff McMahon has rebought this model many times. He tried to even buy this particular unit from me at one point, and I just couldn't let it go. But I don't know, Jeff, maybe if you hit me up again, I'll sell it to you. But it is in really great condition. But it's also on sale for an amazing price directly from Citizen. So who could argue with that at $795? So with that said, let's actually get these pieces on the wrist and see how they wear. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears quite nicely. Quite thin, again. Very svelte in terms of that execution, that silhouette. Definitely slides under a cuff, looks very, very nice, and very tidy. Versus here, yes, look at that, the height, the crown, essentially, that is the top there of the bezel grip. It just feels like some big ornamental piece there, but of course it's also quite functional in terms of the tactile engagement and the clicks that are going on. But you can see there's a lot of details that they don't have to incorporate. I like that they really push themselves in terms of the design. Of course, I definitely like things that are going to be just a little bit more versatile, a little bit more wearable, quote unquote, for everyday use. But again, this is the extreme end of the spectrum. The perfect watch lays somewhere in between both of these. It'd be maybe something that's mechanical, but quite slim, but still has a good enough amount of water resistance. That would be fantastic. But again, yeah, these are ends of a spectrum where there's a lot to be enjoyed. Now, we'll go ahead and tighten up the frame here so that you guys can still get a detailed look, but just add a bit of a true aspect ratio as to how this may look on your own wrist. And you can see, although my wrist is on the larger side of average, it's 7.5 inches. It's also quite round and tall, so it's not like it's flat, wide, and super accommodating to any watch. So you can see there that this still sits quite well. And again, for what it's for, and then by comparison, all of a sudden, this looks kind of small and dainty even. But I will say, thanks to the proportions on the taper, on the facets on this case, the depth in the dial, the angled chaptering, the 3D indices that are just accented to higher standards than really required at this price point. I really, really dig that. So let's go ahead, get these off the wrist, set up for some low light transition and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Okay, again, opposite end of the spectrum in terms of lume, although well applied on that JDM model. Not much to write home about. Whereas the Citizen on the right hand side there, you guys can see that it is quite robust in lume, but it's a dive watch, so it absolutely should be. And so we were thinking, you know, maybe it should have even more lume for being such a thick and chunky beast. But I will say that it does the job. Now, in terms of what I like to work in, is always going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And you guys can see here, very, very legible still. It's really, you can't wash out either one of these dials. There's enough little texturing and finishing tricks that they pull out for everything to work out quite nicely. So yeah, I appreciate the Citizen brand. There's a couple of dress watches that I wear that I really love from Citizen. I almost thought about squeezing them in here, but I thought, you know what, why don't I just keep it to titanium and keep it pretty polarizing in terms of these two. Although I could easily see this being somebody's 2-watch collection if you really think about it. These are just good looking watches, and they perform, guys. They really do. So let's get into some closing final thoughts here. All right. These are both great options from an outstanding brand that I think is quite underrepresented. I will say some pieces have unfortunately gotten a bit of overhype recently, but it's good coverage for Citizen, so I'm glad they are getting the attention they deserve. I'm a big fan of Citizen. Of course, I'm a big Seiko-holic. I love Seiko watches, and yeah, I'm typically going to prefer Seiko. But you guys can see these are just two examples where Citizen really shines for me. Again, as a, you know, maybe even a jaded collector who has too many watches, I really look for those unique and kind of semi-eccentric qualities and features that really justify the watch existing in my collection. So with that said, I think these are two fine examples of Citizen doing just that. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please leave a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.